Like, yeah, Trump's innocent of the charges. He's innocent of the charges. The charges. He's innocent of them. I'm sorry, sir. What charges is he innocent of? Oh, well, you know, the charges. He's innocent. That's all that video was. Go through the charges.
Election interference and abuse of power.
Go through the charges.
And their underlings, Jack Smith. And I've seen this abuse of power because I've suffered through it.
Hey, go through the charges.
I were targeted with a subpoena, grand jury subpoena, and they harassed me for 4 hours in an abusive way, arguing with me about my First Amendment rights, really.
Go through the charges.
And I want to know what Congress is going to do about it.
Go through the charges.
Don't forget. This IG report shows the FBI is broken, irredeemably corrupted. Same goes for the Justice Department. First up is the issuance of a report by the Inspector General of the United States that confirms, as I've noted online, essentially, let's go to the tweet that I mentioned there. Let's get cut to the heart of it. They had 26 confidential human sources on the grounds of the Capitol on January 6th. And as I note, the FBI had a platoon of operatives on the Capitol on January 6th. And as Julie Kelly, our friend, notes, the IG claimed 26 FBI informants were in D.C. on January 6th. And so this report
Wait, wasn't Julie Kelly the one that I talked about with Benny Johnson? Oh no. Okay.
This week, it's long been delayed. And the report mostly focuses on the FBI's use of confidential human sources, the failure to, despite telling Congress otherwise, to ask about intelligence concerning January 6th from its various field offices. But what caught everyone's attention is, and what I think is really a dishonest report in some respects, the admission that there were confidential human sources on the Capitol grounds on January 6th, including several who entered the U.S. Capitol, which, according to the Biden Justice Department, is the equivalent of committing a terrorist act and sufficient to warrant unprecedented types of criminal prosecutions at the federal level, none of which occurred towards these confidential human sources.
So, to be clear, I'm pretty sure it says this. I don't know if it's the article that I read or in the thing, but doesn't the Department of Justice have a policy of not prosecuting people that were just in the restricted zones because it like didn't reach the bar? Like, aren't there like 100 people that aren't federal enforcement? I'm gonna look it up because asking these questions is stupid. Jan 6 FBI. AP. Of the 17 informants who entered the Capitol or surrounding restricted area have been prosecuted, the report says, a footnote says that the U.S. Attorney General's office in Washington said that it generally has not charged those individuals whose only crime on January 6th was to enter the restricted grounds of the Capitol, which has resulted in the office declining to charge hundreds of individuals and have treated the CHS with this consistent approach. I don't know how many fucking times I can copy that. Can't spell. The assistant special agent in charge of counterterrorism told the Inspector General's office that he denied a request from the FBI office to have an undercover employee engage in investigative activity on January 6th. He then, along with said the FBI policy prohibits undercover employees at First Amendment protective without investigative authority. Okay, so I was absolutely right, by the way. This is a direct quote. The U.S. Attorney General's office in Washington said that it, quote, generally has not charged those individuals whose only crime on January 6, 2021 was to enter the restricted grounds surrounding the Capitol, which has resulted in the office declining to charge hundreds of individuals and have treated the CHSs consistent with this approach.
Sources. And the report details that in the following section. Well, let me see what the press release says about it. Oh, this is the kicker. No undercover FBI employees of protests were at the Capitol on January 6th, as if that was the only concern. I mean, what the left is saying is that because the IG found no FBI employees, all the so-called conspiracy theories about January 6th is wrong. Of course, they delineate the so-called or narrow the so-called conspiracy theory to just one issue only, while ignoring the broader issue, which is that the report confirms that there were paid operatives of the FBI on the grounds of the Capitol, monitoring American citizens in their exercise of First Amendment rights, and also present at what the Justice Department and the political left media complex here in Washington, D.C. has told us was the worst day and worst attack on democracy in American history.
Okay. What's wrong with that? What is... Okay. So, also, I reject this. I think the conspiracy that everyone was clearly trying to do is that the FBI instigated the raid on the Capitol, not just investigated it. I feel like if you asked any Democrat whether or not the FBI investigated the raid on the Capitol, they would say absolutely, yeah, duh. But the conspiracy is clearly that they instigated what they call the Fedsurrection, with Ray Epps instructing people to break down barriers. This is... So, if you're claiming that this is narrowing what the conspiracy theory is, that's not true, and what you're doing is broadening what the conspiracy theory is. This is a Mott and Bailey. Whenever you say, "Oh, well, the claim is always that the FBI instigated the raid of the Capitol by having people like Ray Epps encourage people to break down barriers and to enter the Capitol grounds. This has always been the conspiracy. So to walk back and say, yeah, well, there was confidential human sources in the crowd on January 6th that were feeding the FBI information. Okay, and what? So.
And yet the IG focuses on, well, they weren't FBI employees. Well, they were paid operatives of the FBI. It's like the FBI saying, well, it wasn't the FBI that wrote the Steele report. We just paid Chris Steele to write the Steele report targeting Trump. We found no evidence in the materials we reviewed or the testimony we received showing or suggesting the FBI had undercover employees in the various protest crowds. Well, isn't that nice? Well, what about the confidential human sources? Yes, the report also details our findings regarding FBI confidential human sources who were in D.C. on January 6th. Again, written in a way to exonerate the FBI as opposed to hold it accountable. The review determined that none of these FBI CHSs, confidential human sources, were authorized by the FBI to enter the Capitol or restricted area or otherwise break the law on January 6th. Well, they're still responsible if they did that under their theory of the law. Why? Why weren't they prosecuted? Certainly the ones who entered the Capitol.
We already answered
Nor was any CHS directed by the FBI to encourage others to commit illegal acts on January 6th. Okay. Does that answer the question whether confidential human sources paid by the FBI encourage others to commit crimes? No. Does it confirm or give us details as to whether the confidential human sources themselves committed crimes? No.
But that's to say, okay, so when you're claiming that the FBI encouraged people to break down barriers, an informant encouraging people to do it outside of the FBI's direction, actually, despite the FBI's direction of not doing that, that does exonerate the FBI. It just does. If the FBI told them, hey, don't do this, and then a witness that they had did it anyway, that doesn't speak to the FBI. That doesn't speak to the FBI spurring on an insurrection.
So as far as I'm concerned, it's garbage. Thankfully, that was just the press release. I've got the full report here. I'll throw that out later. Page 77 of the IG report, findings regarding FBI confidential human sources who were in D.C. on January 6th, including 3 that had been tasked to report on predicated subjects believed to be attending the rally. So some were tasked to follow people into D.C.
Yes.
Again, who were exercising their First Amendment protected rights.
Right.
Our investigation determined there were a total of 26 FBI confidential human sources from a wide range of FBI field offices in D.C. on January 6th in connection with the events on January 6th. Our review found that no FBI confidential human source was authorized to enter the Capitol or a restricted area or to otherwise break the law on January 6th, nor was any confidential human source directed by the FBI to encourage others to commit illegal acts on January 6th. Of the 26 who were in D.C. for the events, the records we reviewed show that 4 confidential human sources entered the Capitol on January 6th, 13 entered the restricted area, and 9 attended January 6 events but did not enter the Capitol or restricted area or otherwise engage in illegal activity. So that doesn't answer the question about whether the 13 plus 4 to 17 engaged in illegal activity. As noted previously, none of the confidential human sources that entered the Capitol or restricted area.
So he's just nitpicking, because it goes on to say that 9 entered the restricted zone and 4 entered the Capitol. That is illegal activity.
6 have been prosecuted to date. Okay, footnote number 97. So look at footnote number 97. We can draw that up on the screen here. Footnote 97. After reviewing a draft of this report, the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, which is run by Biden appointee, U.S. Attorney Graves, stated in its response to the OIG, the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office generally has not charged those individuals whose only crime on January 6, 2021 was to enter the restricted grounds surrounding the Capitol, which has resulted in the office declining to charge hundreds of individuals, and we've treated the confidential human sources consistent with this approach. Okay, the scope of this review did not include prosecution decisions, including as to the FBI confidential human sources made by the DC USAO after the riot on January 6, 2021. So again, the IG has not investigated what many people believe the abuse of power by the Biden gang to prosecute in a selective way U.S. citizens versus FBI confidential human sources. What does the footnote not say? It references has not charged whose only crime was to enter the restricted grounds. What about the confidential human sources and the Americans who entered the U.S. Capitol who've been charged? Why weren't the confidential human sources charged there?
That's a good question, but this is the problem with conspiracy brain. That's a good question. I do want to know why the 4 people that entered the Capitol weren't prosecuted. But that doesn't make a conspiracy. Saying, I don't know why these people weren't prosecuted, therefore the FBI is staking their whole reputation on not charging these 4 people who we don't even know. We don't know anything about their case. Why this isn't a conspiracy. This isn't like fulfilling.
So here we have a dishonest, disingenuous response, at least as presented by the Office of Inspector General in the report, where they avoid the key issue as to why there was selective prosecution of American citizens who entered the U.S. Capitol, but not of FBI-employed confidential human sources. In our experience, if you're a confidential human source for the FBI, it means they're paying you money. These folks are making a living, in part, working for the FBI by providing them information. So what this means to me, all of this, that the IG is a waste, so let's get rid of that.
That's all he's reading? Oh boy. So the bombshell, the absolute bombshell that came out about FBI informants at January 6th is that there are 4 people that are unaccounted for as to why they weren't prosecuted by the FBI. What a bombshell.
And as I noted previously with IG reports, they're both exposés and cover-ups at the same time. So here you have a modified limited hangout, the Nixon phrase, right, of the detail that there were at least 24, a platoon of FBI operatives on the U.S. Capitol grounds on January 6th, 4 of which entered the U.S. Capitol, according to the Justice Department, which would have been necessarily a crime. Mm-hmm. They weren't prosecuted. Many other Americans were.
Right.
But a cover-up at the same time. So the IG report is both an expose, which is the problem with most IGs in my experience. The IG report is both an expose and a cover-up at the same time. So it exposes FBI misconduct and special treatment by, or disparate treatment between American citizens who are Trump supporters and FBI operatives who are paid by the FBI, and withholding an analysis of that and details about what these confidential human sources actually did and who they were targeting and why on January 6th. And details about whether they actually committed crimes. Did they induce anyone to commit a crime? Encourage? We don't know that. And why didn't the IG figure that out? Because, in my experience, and it's now your experience because you can go read this IG report, which I just threw on the floor, it's a cover-up. And it's just a further reason for President Trump to, in my view, commute the sentence of every single January 6th defendant.
Every single. This is disgusting. This is vile. This is disgusting. So, on the grounds that there were 4 FBI informants, not even employees, not officers, 4 FBI informants that entered the Capitol grounds but were not prosecuted. On those grounds alone, we should commute the sentence of every single person who has charges in relation to January 6th. That's disgusting.
I mean, look at what Biden did. I did a tweet on this the other day. Look at what Biden did.
Oh, he pardoned his son. Oh, my God.
Non-violent crimes who have demonstrated remorse and rehabilitation on commuting the sentences of nearly 1,500 others, many of whom would have received lower sentences today.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's disingenuous. So 1,500 people had their sentences commuted in one day, which the White House is boasting to be the biggest number ever in the modern history of the presidency. And in my view, as I point out in that tweet, I'm looking forward to President Trump pardoning the January 6ers.
So to be clear, there's a wild, huge difference between non-violent drug offenders who are only hurting themselves and hundreds of people who stormed into the Capitol, attacked Capitol Police to try and stall the certification of the vote in hopes that the vice president would break the Electoral Count Act to make Donald Trump the president again. Fuck you. That's 1,000% different. And this guy doesn't have the fucking wiggle room of being Stephen A. Smith and not knowing anything. This dude is a dishonest hack.
You know, Biden is playing the pardon game. He illicitly, in my view, pardoned his son, I think in a constitutionally suspect way. And now every corrupt politician in town.
We can't make a video about January 6th without mentioning Biden pardoning his son. Why?
Is lining up for preemptive pardons by Joe Biden, and he's considering them. The execrable Bill Clinton, one of the most corrupt presidents to sit in office, he was on TV earlier this week promoting a pardon for his wife, his co-conspirator in shakedown operations of foreign governments and agents and actors and companies. Talk about RICO. Might as well be asking for a preemptive pardon for himself.
Has this guy made any videos about the about Jack Smith, about the Jack Smith indictment? We're gonna see. I need to know. Ha! Conservative, nonpartisan. Okay. What is playing? What the fuck? Wait. Stop. Okay. Okay. Jack Smith. Oh, it didn't go. Jack Smith. Okay. I'm losing my mind.
Relates to the Presidential Records Act. And of course, the left went crazy because that seemed to suggest that Judge Cannon was willing to at least let a jury decide if the Presidential Records Act exonerated and vindicated President Trump. And so in response to that, Jack Smith's legal team, Justice Department attorneys working for you and me, the federal taxpayer, went ballistic and filed an hysterical brief that focuses its attacks on Judicial Watch and me. The president of Judicial Watch posted the following two statements on Twitter, and there's all my tweets, so my tweets are now part of the record. It's easier for me to read the screen than my... Fact check. The left media is being dishonest about the Trump records issue. The president has discretion on what documents to retain as presidential records while in office, so the law allows Trump...
This is federal... It's classified documents.
This is trying to jail Trump for, in the least, having the gall to exercise his, again, First Amendment rights to petition his government. And obviously his duties and responsibilities as president.
Oh, I'm gonna go crazy. Okay.
Part of this suppression, part of this election interference also involves, moving on to the next topic, the effort to jail Trump and other innocent Americans by the Biden-Harris regime and their Democratic Party allies, prosecutors and judges.
Wow,
in
what a
like
fast pivot. This has to be a record. 36 minutes into a video about the Jack Smith indictment, we already go to Joe Biden. Wow. Crazy fast.
In New York. And Jack Smith, in a show of utter contempt for the rule of law, free and fair elections in the Supreme Court and the U.S. Constitution, re-indicted Trump this week. Re-indicted him. Now, this is what the status of his investigations, or non-investigations, are, because I think they're all just political. Judge Cannon in Florida, in the sham documents case, found him to be an unconstitutional appointee, and therefore his investigations invalid, and she threw out the whole case. So he's desperately trying to appeal that. Up here in Washington, D.C., the Supreme Court eviscerated his first indictment of Trump as being unconstitutional in large measure, and rather than run away and go home, or, basically...
This is absolutely vile. People who know the law and still defend this piss me off so much. So what he's covering up here, by the way, in framing the first indictment being thrown out as Jack Smith being slammed down in D.C. for filing an unconstitutional indictment, is his indictment being found to not adhere to a completely wild and out of left field ruling from the Supreme Court that found that the president has conditional immunity from criminal prosecution. So, no, he didn't get struck down by D.C. because it was unconstitutional. He had to rework the indictment, which, by the way, another grand jury agreed to indict. He had to rework the indictment to work around the fucking batshit immunity decision from the Supreme Court.
Basically shut it down. He doubled down and re-indicted him just 60 days or so before the election, pretending to comply with the Supreme Court's ruling that Trump has, and every president, has immunity for prosecution for official acts as a president. And what he did, I carefully reviewed this new re-indictment, or what is technically, it's not technically, it's literally called a superseding indictment. It's the same damn charges, pardon my language.
Mm-hmm.
He took out a few paragraphs and a few pages where it was clear he was alleging that the president did something as president that he should be thrown in jail for, and he supposedly cleaned it up that way, while leaving all sorts of other material in there that is a thumb of the nose at the Supreme Court, because it clearly involves his duties and responsibilities as president.
Is he gonna, let me guess, he's gonna use the argument that communicating with his presidential staff is a official act, and so it shouldn't even be admitted into court, because this is the state of our democracy, is that a president talking to anybody in his staff is an official act and cannot be even admitted into a court of law. That's what he's going to say. So he's basically going to make the argument that the president is above the law and take the L. Jack Smith.
He's essentially trying to throw Trump in jail for disputing the election, and dare I say it, doing what a president is obligated to do pursuant to his oath of office to make sure the laws are being faithfully executed and that the elections were being lawfully run here in Washington, D.C. and in the several states. He had a positive moral obligation, constitutional obligation as president, and he's trying to...
We're going to have the same problem that we're going to have with the other fucking scum hack fuck lawyer who went on Benny Johnson's... Please read anything in the indictment. Go into any sort of detail so your fucking Republican viewers can understand what's in this indictment. Please bring up the word elector once, bring up certificate of ascertainment once, bring up DOJ. Like, please, I beg of you, go into any sort of detail of what Donald Trump did on January 6th, other than using vague terms as, oh, he challenged the election like his First Amendment right allows.
I'm going to throw him in jail for doing that. 60 plus days before the election.
And all of this before the election.
I heard you read the indictment. It reads like something the DNC or MSNBC wrote. It's not lawful. It's a political polemic. Here was my immediate reaction to it the other day.
Go through it.
Abuse of power today by the Biden-Harris regime with the re-indictment of President Trump. The Biden Justice Department, Jack Smith, etc., not satisfied with losing already before the Supreme Court with an unconstitutional abusive indictment, has pretended that changing a few words would make the indictment okay. It isn't. This wasn't a legal act. This was a political act.
Go through it.
Of the number one candidate for president just 2 weeks or so before the first votes were
cast. Go through it.
Who are they fooling? This is one of the worst abuses of power. This whole lawfare.
Go through it.
To rig the elections through illicit prosecutions by the Democratic Party politicians and their bureaucratic appointees has never been seen before in American history. And so Judicial Watch will continue the heavy lifting to expose the truth about what's going on here. And of course, Congress.
Go ahead.
This whole mess.
Expose the truth. Go through the indictment, please. I beg you, please.
And let's hope the courts again step in and preserve the rule of law. Yeah, this is trying to jail Trump for, in the least, having the gall to exercise his, again, First Amendment rights to petition his government. And
First Amendment rights to have people perjure themselves on certificates of ascertainment and submit certificates of ascertainment to the joint session, even though they're not certified by the states. That's his First Amendment right. It's his First Amendment right to do that. It's his First Amendment right to go to illegal extents to convince the vice president to break the Electoral Count Act. That's his First Amendment right.
His duties and responsibilities as president. So not only is it constitutionally infirm because of the Supreme Court decision, but it's an abuse of President Trump's civil rights under the color of law. To me, it's a criminal indictment in the sense that the filing was of a criminal nature.
Go through the charges.
Election interference and abuse of power.
Go through the charges.
And their underling, Jack Smith. And I've seen this abuse of power because I've suffered through it. Judicial Watch and
go through the charges.
I were targeted with a subpoena, grand jury subpoena, and they harassed me for 4 hours in an abusive way, arguing with me about my First Amendment rights, really.
Go through the charges.
And I want to know what Congress is going to do about it.
Go through the charges.
Don't forget.
Not one single mention of anything in the indictment. Go fuck yourself. Let's see if this guy has any other. Let's see if this guy has anything else going through the actual charges. Just 60 days. All of this before the election, too. I'm going bananas. Every time I see a Republican act hyper dishonest and completely misrepresent everything to their audience. Like, yeah, Trump's innocent of the charges. He's innocent of the charges. The charges. He's innocent of them. I'm sorry, sir. What charges is he innocent of? Oh, well, you know, the charges. He's innocent. That's all that video was. This has been the longest hour and a half.